Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, in the country, and whether you're watching the replay or watching this live. Today's webinar is a long one. I'll warn you now. You can catch it on the replay if you decide to disappear off, but you won't get the live chat. I will be around, even though this is a pre-recorded webinar. It's an interview that I did a couple of weeks ago, actually. I'll be answering chat questions and things like that in the background, dedicated as I am. Before we kick off, because I will need to kick off quite sharp because I've got some other things going on as well. Paul says, hello, everybody. Paul is part of my regular frequent flyers gang. And Francis Moore, hello, Francis. Doing some interesting things in the National Health Service over there. From dark and cold Wilton in the United Kingdom. Yes, it's snowing over there at the moment. It's all a bit exciting, isn't it? Doug from Victoria, British Columbia. Hey, David from, I'm not sure where you're from actually, David. No, I'm sure you can tell us another time. Hello. And Mamun Rashid, hey. I'm going to call you M because it's easy. You can call me I. Good evening to you as well. And Doug Filter says, another atmospheric river on the way. Ew, that's the weather, isn't it? Yeah, horrible, horrible stuff. And love from India. Hello. Pleased to speak to you. We had an interview that's not going out in the winter webinars, but it is on the YouTube channel with Nirav Kaku from India, and he says it is Mamun Rashid says that is correct. Yeah, Nirav is in India, and he's on our YouTube channel. So if you want to catch up with that interview, that is there as well. Who else have we got? Hi from the incipient atmospheric river event in San Carlos, California. Yeah, a lot of people might be going, what's this all about? Especially if you're watching this months and months later and it's the middle of summer or something like that. But all sorts of, excuse me, exciting, wonderful things. David, who I'm sure you remember, and he's my predecessor's predecessor. That makes sense. Excellent developer, taught me so many things. I literally learned Delphi by watching David doing exactly what I'm doing today. In 2024, the first day of winter is Saturday, December the 21st, 2024. David, you're always so 100% accurate. Yeah, you know what? A lot of other people said, hey, do you know what? It's summer in Brazil and things like that. And we get it. We picked calling it winter webinars because it doesn't even really get to be winter in Dallas, to be honest. Maybe we get about a week of cold weather in February. That's about it. Iman from Iran, hello there. Wow, we've got lots of people. And as Paul says, David I is here. Actually, David I drops in quite regularly. He's retired now and taking an easier life. Although I know from the things I see him posting, he's not taking it easy. He's just it's just slowed down a bit. Took his foot off the gas pedal a bit. He still posts and has lots of stuff and technology. David I is a very, very popular figure. If you don't know who he is, just Google him and look at some of his YouTube videos. The guy's a genius. Einstein, salut Einstein from Nantes in France. And Rick says, David I, are you still into the tie-dye thing? I guarantee he is. I notice I don't go for that. I've actually gone the opposite direction, and I just go for the black covers all sins look rather than the I have to say I've been listening to Grateful Dead just recently, and there is a kind of it's starting to get into my skin, and I should start going for some tie-dye. And of course David I says he's still wearing tie-dye every day. Of course he is. At one point everybody who did developer relations used to wear the same shirts with the tie-dye, and it was a thing. I go for the boring black stuff right now. And also it means I can have multiple shirts which all look the same. So if I do cuts between days or something like that, then you don't know unless I put on some more weight or my beard is less. C programming is the first language in India. Yes, of course. The order of batting for most people is C, C++, Java and a few other things as well. And then actually still at number 10 is Delphi. So it's all good stuff. We did a big webinar yesterday for C++ with David Millington, senior project manager for that, and talking about Visual Assist and talking about the latest development in C++ Builder and RAD Studio with C++. Very, very exciting stuff. I mean, we are really excited. We're using Clang now, or C-Lang, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It gives you many benefits, and you can literally compile the OpenCV project, which is millions of lines of code. I think David said up nearly 15 million lines of code, and it takes a while to compile, but it would take any C++ compiler hours to do it. But the latest version of C++ Builder and RAD Studio with C++ compiles it out of the box. That's the test they use for it now. It's a very complicated library, but you know, the latest version of C++ copes with it. So it's pretty exciting stuff. David Millington is super up and down about it. If you want to try it out for yourself, you can scan that QR code. See, I'm getting better at pointing to it. Go there, download the trial, and try C++ Builder for yourself if you're into C++, and have a look and see what you think. You know, I can tell you it's great, but until you try it, you can't be sure, can you? I could just be doing it. Anyway, look, everybody, we are going to go straight to the video. This is an interview with Tim Coates. He's an Australian. He won't be here for the live chat, I don't think, because of the timing, because it's like 3 a.m. for him or something like that. But we cover everything. It's about an hour and 40 minutes long. So sit back, grab a coffee or something like that, and I'll see you later to say goodbye. But see you soon. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, click on the subscribe button and the like button as well. I'm sorry my image is a bit grainy. I've got the blinds closed. I haven't put my super light on me, so the camera's kind of pixelating a little bit because of the darkness. It's trying to compensate for it being dark. I apologize about that. But anyway, yes, click if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitch, click on the like and subscribe buttons, especially on YouTube, and click on that little bell icon. We won't know who you are. It'll just subscribe you, and then you'll get notified when we do random things like suddenly go live because we've got something interesting to talk about. We want to get to the stage where we don't always schedule things, where we will be doing some shorts for Instagram and shorts for YouTube as well. Those are the kind of couple of minute long videos to show you something really interesting that we've got. We've got a lot of very big projects coming up, a lot of very interesting stuff. If you go to the blog as well on the website, you'll read all about Miniature Wonderland in Hamburg at the moment, which is a massive project and very exciting. Anyway, enough from me. I'm going to turn you over to the video from Tim Coates. I'll see you in about an hour and 40 minutes.
One of the places I would hang out for different reasons was Reddit, and I got sort of like irritated with the, you know, what language should I learn, or what language should I learn next, and the popular, you know, and so I felt that Pascal had a lot to contribute, but if it's not spoken about, then the inevitable would happen. So, you know, I felt that if I might be able to share, let's say, my passion for the language, then, and if somebody learned something from it, well, that would be better. So, you know, that was probably the start of my motivation, but also I wanted to be able to share not so much just the language, but to also share other aspects of software development or programming with the community. You know, things such as how to debug a program. You know, what makes up a good user interface. Programming is just one aspect.
Some more generic stuff is what you're saying. Is, you know, the business of being a developer, or the skills of being a developer, rather than, you know, here's C# or C++ or Pascal, but actually, you know, more broad things. Is that what you're saying? More broad techniques?
Yeah, well, yeah, yes to more broad things, you know, because I have also been a tutor. you know, and you know, the languages that I cover as a tutor, you know, were quite wide. But when you are, let's say you were tutoring, let's say, a third-year student, and they may come from a Python background, but they don't know let's, for lack of a better word, the basics of debugging a program. And it's like, you know, wow, you know, I can do that. I can actually step through my code. And so some of those things, if you just stuck with coding, then you don't utilize all the tools which are available to you within your environment, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. And a lot of streamers actually just show code, which is fine. And there's a lot of Brazilian streamers for Object Pascal. There's just thousands of Brazilians everywhere doing Pascal, and they're all quite young. They get taught it at school, which is one of the benefits. But they get taught specifically Delphi at school. A guy called Landerson Gomez is very big in organising that, amongst a few others, George De Luca in Portugal. But they're all quite young. But so consequently, the younger developers like that are doing things like streaming to TikTok and streaming to Instagram Shorts. I don't know so much YouTube Shorts, but the content's much shorter, and they tend to show, oh, you know, like, yeah, I'm going to show you this piece of code, and it's that, which of course is, you know, the thing today is a short attention span, short grabbing, and we're going to do it ourselves. Unfortunately, you know, that's the way we're going to lean as well, because that's unfortunately the way the algorithms work. But a lot of those videos, because they're so short, get right to the point. They just, you know, here's some code, but actually it doesn't explain a lot of the you know, reasoning behind it, which is quite interesting. So you said you were a tutor. That actually kind of leads me on to one of my questions, which is, have you always been a developer? I mean, I noticed you said you're on your blog, I think, you're a parish councillor, a parish administrator, and a dedicated counsellor. So I wasn't sure. First of all,
okay.
I'm sure that's a term that Australians know.
Well,
but
I will try to give you my life in a abridged format without boring you or your audience. I thought, look, I honestly,
that's my job to bore them. So,
oh no, you don't do that. Okay, so look, the reality is, in the 80s. Let's just say, computers. Yeah, I had an Amstrad in high school days, but computing wasn't necessarily, let's say, big. And I sort of fell into computing, to be honest, because in my head, I was going to do work in, let's say, economics, but I didn't get into university. And I did what was a business computing associate diploma. And I found out that I was good at the computing. I liked the computing. Back then it was actually C, Pascal, and COBOL. There may be another language, but they're the ones that's, you know, come to mind. And those particular subjects got me into computer science at QUT. I finished with a master in computer science out of all of that. Again, because I was sort of good at it, even at university, I did some, while I was at university, I did some tutoring there. And I was lucky enough to find a job in the city that I live in. And I did, and I've done that for most of the time. I will say that the IT environment changed a lot between when I started and now, shall we say. There were some, let's say, health concerns for me in the last years, which, you know, had made sort of like I had to then, let's say, step away from IT and had to look at what I wanted to do. And that sort of like pushed me into that parish admin job / counselling space because I knew that, well, I felt that people, look, at the end of the day, people want someone to listen to them. And,
Right.
when things are tough, rather than say, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. And, so, but quite recently, I've switched up from being a parish admin to doing full on administration, at a college, and my programming in YouTube is, I'm trying to keep up the same number of hours and quality with everything else that I do. I think that, go on.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, for people that don't know, because I don't know, what does a parish administrator do? I mean, it sounds like you go around telling people to, stand up straight and stop walking on the grass or something.
I wish I had that power. No, it's basically, you basically look after all the emails, bookings, invoicing, what else? Service guides, people coming in off the street, looking for something. The place where I was working at, they had like a thing called Threads where people could get clothing for free. So it was
it's like a community project type
yeah.
thing,
It was it's a job where it is full of interruptions. But and part of the reason, but while I was doing that, it was part-time, and it still allowed me to do, let's say, software development, part-time in the afternoon, with what I was still doing from my previous job. So, but obviously when you have, let's say, one part-time job that gives you guaranteed money, one not so guaranteed, and in this day and age, how things are going in the IT landscape, this current job that I do has, gives me a bit more, what's the word, safety, shall we say?
Yeah, it's a bit more predictability. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah. So, what, although you said you did COBOL, which I actually was a COBOL programmer for a few. I'm a bit older than you. I heard you and Jim talking about your age, and actually I'm older than Jim.
I know.
Although people don't normally expect it, but I am actually quite a bit older than him. And you talked about COBOL. I mean, what was it was there like a light bulb moment where you went, I've got to be a software developer. This is for me. I mean, have you always felt like that was how your brain worked, or was it something where you went, oh, I bet I could make a lot of money doing that? Or, I mean, what is it that motivated you to actually become a developer?
It wasn't really a lot. Okay, money would never have been the motivation. It was sort of like, oh, wow, look at that working. I can make this do something. And so if you're looking at the 80s and the 80s and certainly the very early 90s, if you read your Dr. Dobbs, there was a guy called Al Stevens.
I remember Dr. Dobbs very well. It was the #1 journal for all developers. So, I mean, there'll be quite a lot of younger people watching who go, Dr. Dobbs, is that like a medical book? No, it wasn't. It was like the thing to read back in the day for computers, and I miss it. You mentioned Free Pascal and Lazarus. I actually write some articles for Blaise Pascal magazine. My hope is that magazine will grow, and it needs a little bit modernization. I think that's fair to say that. I think Detlef, who is the editor, would also probably go along with those. But back in the day before the internet, Dr. Dobbs and various journals like that were really they were formative, I think, for many developers. They certainly for me, and I don't know about you, but reading those articles inspired me to get better as a developer and taught me things.
Well,
And
and for me, that's how I learned. How I sort of like learned to program, shall we say, because I think in the first few books, well, put it this way, CDs weren't around. I think in the first version of Al Stevens' books, shall we say. So you had to actually write the code out yourself. And that was one way of, let's say, honing or practicing your skills, versus copy and paste, today.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Or even ask Chat GPT, which is like the number one thing. And it quite often spews out nonsense.
I mean,
At least those magazines, when you typed in the listings, they were usually thoroughly debugged. I mean, sometimes there would be typos in, but if you got a listing from a magazine or even from the discs, where they used to get well, they weren't even floppy disks. They tended to be these 3.5 inch or 3 inch
I'm
discs or
pretty
something like that.
certain.
But yeah, but when you
I,
got
I,
those, the listing, the code was accurate. It worked. Not always,
Look,
but mostly.
I can tell you, I would have gotten the Ball and C compiler on 3.5-inch discs, and
Yeah.
Turbo Pascal would have been on 5.25. That's how I
Yeah.
can still remember.
Excuse me. And a lot of them as well. I remember Delphi, when Delphi 1 came out, it was a whole bunch of floppy disks. You would have to swap them around as well to do various things as well. And
But one of the things
I predate the IBM PC, so I'm way before that. I started coding in the 70s.
And I guess that in some respect the typing out of a program, shall we say, to me it's a bit like when a student wants to learn how to play the piano. You can play a song, but at some point in time, I feel anyway, you have to learn how to do scales and how to play softly, or
music theory, the actual
yeah,
science of how the music's put together,
and
not
then
just
practice and
copy.
practice and practice. So those, let's say, those books and university, shall we say. Oh, and the other thing also is that one thing which, I wasn't overly brilliant at maths in high school, but one thing I found that I was good at when I went to university was, set mathematics. So that was something where you could take something, let's say, prove it would work, and then you could code it and it worked. So I think it was actually creating something out of nothing almost.
Yeah, that's always been my thing, that it comes out of my head into the keyboard and becomes a program. And I don't want people to. I don't want to project the idea that programmers are elitist and that they're a different kind of species. But unfortunately, reality is it does take a special characteristic in you to be a developer. And anybody can be taught to program within reason. I mean, there's some people, they're just born illogical. It doesn't matter what you do, they're never going to get it. But majority of it, it's the same as some people can't sing. It's just, they're not built that way. They're good at something else, but they're just not able to put down a set of instructions logically. But to me, most developers that I know, they vary. There's some that are out there, and slightly insane, and some of them are very unusual personalities, like Richard Stallman, for example, is very notorious. Even Linus Torvald is an unusual character, shall we say. I wouldn't want to be his next door neighbor. But most of these people tend to be, most developers I meet have got there's something in them that makes them want to sit down and code, because it's a weird thing to do, is to sit there and just, when I explain to other people what it's like to be a developer when you're programming, to me, and I can only talk about my experience, is when I'm coding, I'm kind of inside here. It's like I'm in a universe that exists only in my head, and everything disappears, and I can literally understand everything I'm doing about the coding because I can just see it. I visualize it.
Yeah,
Not,
I
I don't
I'm a
like
bit
go,
like
oh,
that.
here's
Yeah.
a flow chart or something. I just know how it works. And when someone says, my wife, my wife's my third wife, and we've been married 15 years this month actually,
Yeah.
and I wrote a
Congrats.
program for her very early on when we were married,
Mm,
and when we were first married, and she mentioned that she worked for a different organisation to one she does at the time, but they needed something done. They're a bunch of visiting nurses. They go to visit people that are sick in their houses, and it's a charitable organisation. And they needed something done, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'll write your program to do that." And she gave me some instructions on what they needed to happen, the
yeah.
result, and I went ahead and wrote the code. And it didn't occur to me that this was unusual because that's what we do, right?
Mm,
And she sent the code up to her colleagues, and they incorporated and ran it. And she came back and went, "It worked. It did
mm,
everything I asked it to do." And I said, and like it wasn't
yeah.
a surprise to me because I'm a developer, and but to her she is technical. She's a
Mm,
IT tech. She sits there and does technical support all day, and she knows more about computers in some ways than I do, certainly
mm,
at the operating system level. But to her, it was just unimaginable that you could give someone a problem
mm.
and they would go, "Here's a program that fixes it." And to me, I don't know. I mean, is that what other people think of us? Is that how
Well,
you think?
okay.
Just go, I know how
My
to do this, you know.
Yeah. So my brother is a lawyer, and he's look. I would consider him smarter
So
than
he's
me.
a psychopath then, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably one of them as well.
Bankers,
Um,
politicians, and lawyers, yeah.
and but he's said though that he couldn't write a program to save his life, or argue with you, or use logic to make his way out of a paper bag. But I'm
Right.
thinking, but that's what you're doing when you're making an argument for your case. But it's a separate, it's a different sort of skill, shall we say, to
Yeah.
know how, And look, I'm going to dumb it right down. I equate, uh, programming per se to like making a cake. You
Yeah.
know, there are instructions, there are rules. Obviously, the language, changes how it may be done, but it is sort of like a problem solving. How do I make a cake? Um, or if it was, let's say, someone who I'm trying to think of another example, but whatever someone's job is, from a Turing perspective, I try and make them think of their job. If they're trying to learn how to do programming, that is. So if you can put it in their job context and they can see it in their job context, then they will have the possibility of knowing how to write a program. For me, I like to cook, so my cooking analogy
Me too.
becomes easy for me. Um, but then I guess the other part of for me though, programming, and I'm going to say this is the one thing which I like about, let's say, Delphi, is that it's also, for me, it's half science and half an art. I know someone once said, I think it would have been at university or early days of YouTube, where someone said you can have a good user interface and a crappy program behind it, or a good program behind it and a crappy user interface, but you can't have both together because you don't have the time to do that. For my mind, though, I don't like things being a pixel out. So I'd need to have.
There is a certain like high proportion of people in the industry with OCD, because my wife always gets annoyed because I'm the kind of person, I don't have OCD, by the way, as far as I'm
Mhm.
aware, but I am the kind of person that thinks ahead. And I think that's part of being a programmer, is that you are, she says, you're used to controlling everything as a programmer. And that's true. Like the great thing about being a software developer is, well, it's also the curse, is that you can tell the computer what to do. And as long as you tell it right, 9 times out of 10, it will do exactly what you said it to do, even if what you told it to do was wrong. As long as the instructions are, syntactically correct, it will work. Well, the real world isn't like that, and so it can be a little bit frustrating when you're saying, shut this door, lock it at night so we don't get robbed, kind of thing. And other people, I think, don't always. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm weird, but I mean, you did mention Pascal, which is obviously one of the things we're talking about.
Yes.
If we were to talk about what is it you like about Pascal in particular, and what this is always a leading question for Delphi developers, which is, what's your least favorite Object Pascal keyword or construct? And I'll go first. Mine is with. I think the with should be wiped out because it is just the amount, especially double widths. When you can say with this object and this object.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times I get, there are some instances where it's useful, but they're so few and far between. It'd be better to get rid of it than have the convenience of not having to create an object or something. So
I have. Okay, so I have used that particular width on occasion, and I'll tell you where I would use it. But look, I know whatever the programming community is, whether it's C, C++, Python, Pascal, Object Pascal, Delphi, whatever, people will always there will be their pet peeve. For me, I just call it an idiosyncrasy of the language. It had a purpose when it was created, and now maybe not so. When you were working back when I was at university, one of the things we were taught at university was with Modular 2, and it was about opaque types. And you'd keep everything, hidden, let's say, from the caller. You could, let's say, set something, do something with it, but what was happening internally was hidden. So, for instance, you would separate the, let's say, in a Pascal sense, separate a T object from something else, and I could get away with having something called a name, and it would not be the object name, for instance. So, in my old world, shall we say, where I was working with billing systems or for phone systems, there would be, let's say, a structure for a call record, and I would have an initialization function for that, so I could set it up with all the default settings. The particular record structure would have it's about 25 to 40 settings in there, but yes, there is a with a call record do begin splat. Because things like time of call equals now, duration equals 0, I needed to have some sort of defaults which weren't going to be all 0, shall we say. So in that sort of context, with works. But I think if you just chuck it in a form, or try and use it within a form, then it doesn't work quite as well as you would like it to. And having said that, there's a guy, there's another programmer in Australia who does stuff with C++. He does games, and he likes to expand things out fully as well. So rather than using like an alias for anything, you avoid the confusion. So so with an if then, actually no, I have worked also with places where they have used with too much, and you do get lost into what's being referenced there. So would it be my least? So would a with be my least favorite? Probably yes, but I don't. It's not my. I don't hate it. Put it that way.
So if I want to start, if you want to start a fight with the developer, the easiest way is to say tabs or spaces. Which way do you lean?
I'm spaces
we're all
all the
going
way.
to judge you, whatever your answer is, because 50% of people
I am 100% spaces.
Right, okay. There's a really great scene in Silicon Valley, the series, and we're going to be doing later on in the series. We're going to be recreating Not a Hot Dog and Bro from Silicon Valley. So, there's a really great scene in there where Richard, the one of the main protagonists, is going out with a girl, and she's the girl of his dreams, and she keeps using spaces, and he is a tab guy, and of course he uses I think it was Emacs or Vim. So, you know, there's a thing about Vim programmers that they just don't want to use more keyboard presses than they have to. But of course, in Delphi, you can choose to do it either way. I personally use smart tabs and spaces. So yeah, it kind of a little bit of both, really. It's
I'm probably going to say I'm a bit old school insofar as when tabs like 8 characters, you can, even though a character is one, you know, when appearance wise it's four spaces is okay, but when it goes out to 8, that's too much for me.
Yeah, me too.
And something like the early versions of Notepad, I think, would have been 8 characters at least, and your code goes, you know, all the way out there, and that does my head in.
Yeah.
You know, if you go back to Turbo Pascal, it was 80 characters by 25, and that is how unfortunately, that's how my mind works.
And that's why there's that border down the editor as well in Rad Studio, is that 80 character border. People don't realize that, but that is a 40-year-old thing there, because that's how long Turbo Pascal's been around. It's 40 years. A 40-year-old historical artifact, shall we say, because nowadays, of course, people have got 2K, 4K monitors. I mean, I'm talking to you and I'm looking at a 3K monitor, I think, or something like that. But yeah, you mentioned
Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob, yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, he in a recent thing of that's one of his shorts, to be honest, but he was talking about the 80 columns, and he said it was actually 72 because the last 8 were reserved for something. But you know,
you said COBOL. Well, you know as well as I do, in COBOL programming, it was all about the columns: column A, column B, column C, and you know, you would get cascading kind of conditional statements in COBOL that would look like a kind of inverted V shape.
Well, okay, yeah.
There's only so far you could go because you ran out of column space.
Well, okay, and when you say it goes out like that, shall we say, that's one of the things I'll say that draws me to Pascal, shall we say. And look, C can have a certain elegance as well, but for me, code should tell a story. I should be able to read the code and understand what's happening, and that also then has implications on how big functions should be as well. But if the code to me reads like a book, then it goes out like that, and I can see the function in a let's say in a screen, then I can see the story the program's trying to tell. You know, is some condition then.
This goes back to things like DRY, you know, the acronym for, you know, don't repeat yourself, and all of the clean coding concepts like functions should only do one thing, you know, a method should only do one thing.
And I'm a big believer in all of that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at organizations that I had this discussion yesterday with someone talking about code formatting. Because it's broken in Rad Studio at the moment, if you use inline vars and things like that. I remember when they released inline vars for Rad Studio, because obviously I was working for Embarcadero at the time, and I was dead set against it. You know, I knew they were going to introduce it long before the public knew, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's absolutely sacrilege. You know, that's not Pascal. But actually now, because it does type inference and things like that, it's very useful, certainly for loops as well and things like that. It's very handy. But you know, coding standards and coding formatting, you know, there's a difference between how your code is laid out on the screen, but compared to clean coding techniques, like places where they say you should only have one exit point in a function, which I think is actually quite sensible, because otherwise you see a lot of them I understand why they're doing it, because it is optimal in terms of how much code is executing, but not really with the conditionals. But some of them say, if something, exit, if something else, exit, and then a very complicated set of conditions, exit. And it makes it extremely difficult to read, when really what you want it to say is, if this, and this is all true, then do this code. And so you've got one single point of entry and exit. It makes a lot of sense. You did mention projects that you worked on in passing. I didn't catch quite what you were saying, but what sort of projects have you worked on then as a developer, over the years?
Okay. So it started with writing TSRs, and they were in C and assembler. At round about the same time, there in Brisbane, actually. So I live in Brisbane, and there was a person who had, let's say, a system written in Turbo Pascal where you could define a database, and I can't remember whether it would also create the form or how you would design a form, but you have to remember this is also in the days of DOS.
Right.
So we're talking pre-Windows here. And at the place where I was working, at that stage, I was the one who knew Pascal. And so, hey, you're looking after this puppy.
It's your job. Oh, good. Yeah.
Well, look, and that, I'm not saying that wasn't really my introduction, because my introduction was in university and before then. But okay, so one of the things which I'm not saying that all programmers, know this or say this, but there is a skill in being able to write code. You may, because you said that when you said your story about you wrote the program and you went, and it's a skill that other people don't necessarily have. So we don't always recognize that talent in ourselves, shall we say? And
it always amazes me when someone is I mean, it's good for your ego, but it's always amazing when someone just said, "Oh, you're so clever how you did that," and I'm like, it's what I do. It's like I don't know how to do anything different. I wanted to be a programmer from the age of 14, so this is what I do. I thought it was cool when I was 14. Now it's just what I do. It's a job.
Yeah.
So,
and
thanks for making me feel good, but it's like being able to bake a cake or play the guitar is what you do.
So back then in the early 90s, so it's basically software for businesses, so they could basically monitor their phone bill, or make sure the employee, how. Look, I think it was more of a monitoring their phone bill, making sure that their system was being used efficiently, shall we say, as opposed to being monitoring call center agents. Anyway, so then it would have been. I was also then involved in writing a billing system, which was used by one of the smaller carriers over here. I worked with systems that did the back end stuff for one of the real estate groups over here. The security job that wasn't in Delphi. Then somebody wanted me to do some more billing stuff for one of the groups in the States. So I did some, and so I looked after a team from here. And after that, it was, let's say, website stuff in Delphi. Believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do. I mean, nowadays, yes, I believe it. But back in the day, maybe even as little as 10 years ago. Intraweb existed, of course, and that was at the time, probably 10 years ago, maybe a bit more. That was the way you could do stuff on the web, but then you had web broker and a few other technologies as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, we actually use UniGUI. So
UniGUI, yes. Well, that's a more recent development, but yeah, it's a great project. UniGUI,
I can't remember how long ago, but it was.
It's good stuff. UniGUI. I mean, there's more choices now. TMS Web Core is a very interesting project. I've worked on a big project that used that, and there's a few others as well. And of course, Web Stencils in version 12, which I have to say, of all the things that came out in 12, apart from Skier being built into the IDE and being capable, you can do some amazing things with Skier. That was a great thing. But I think the next big step was Web Stencils, because it's based off of a project Marco Cantu worked on, and kind of expanded from there. But I've got a webinar coming up about Web Stencils, but we presented a few.
Cool.
We've been on a bit of a tour recently, some of us, Portugal and Brazil and a few other places. But Web Stencils is, I think that's how it should be done. I think the benefit of it is that you're letting the web page be a web page, not be a Delphi program that happens to spew something out. And so you can give the stencil or the template to a proper web developer and say, do your web development magic.
Yeah.
Just put these placeholders in and I'll fill it with the stuff that we're good at. Because Delphi and certainly Free Pascal as well, both of them suffer from the problem that, and you mentioned this really with the billing system, we're silently successful. This is my personal mantra. You get a lot of systems out there, but people don't know that they're powered by Pascal because they just work. And they do quite a lot of things that people don't realize. There's like everything from games to a whole big thing that I'm writing an article about at the moment called Wonderland in Italy or Holland. I'm not sure where it is, but it's a big like scale model of Monaco with the Monaco Grand Prix and all the rest of it. Everything, including a crowd scene where they've got TVs. Like if you go to see the racing, you get these big kind of screens broadcasting the action, so that the drivers are a mile away, but you can see the overtake and all the rest of it. They even stream that using Delphi down to little screens like this. They monitor the speed, alter scale on Raspberry Pi, and it's all done with Pascal.
Look, I don't. Look, I have that. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Well, I mean, that's the problem that all of these things are happening around you. Schiphol Airport. If you go to the airport in Amsterdam, all the overhead announcements, they're all driven by Delphi. All of the local advertising in the United States, and that's a lot of local advertising. It's very hyper local in the United States. I can get adverts for my local area, like literally the neighborhood I live, pushed to my TV. Which is a recent innovation, probably the last 5 years. That's all done by Delphi as well. A company called Wide Orbit did. As you said, the billing is one of the things that you worked on that was written in Pascal and Delphi as well. So it's everywhere.
Look, I think
that's the thing. I think
the reason why I feel that there's always been this debate or argument about let's say Pascal's dying, and I think because the community doesn't make a big scene about what they do, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but
make a big scene.
But what I'm trying to get at here is that look, when people bring out things like the stats for which are the most popular languages, they're probably up there, but how many people also don't bother to vote? They don't know it's there. They don't go to Stacks. They don't go to Stack Overflow or whoever's doing the latest thing.
Right now, on the TIOB index, Delphi / Object Pascal is number 10. It's the 10th most popular programming language in the world. It's gone up. It was 17 a year ago, and it's now 10th. And that is not based on votes. That's based on the number of projects available on things like GitHub and questions on /dot, Facebook groups, social media, YouTube channels like your own. Down at the bottom here, subscribe to Tim's channel. Let's like and subscribe, as I say, and you know, all those things. So it'll bounce up and down. I'm no fool, but you know, people realise that you can do. You know, the point I was actually making about the silently successful thing is that all of the glue logic behind the scenes for something using web stencils can be done by any Pascal / Delphi programmer. And that's the bit we're good at, writing you know, like services running on a server, running on a PC, generating lots of data and manipulating that data and doing all the stuff reliably, not going wrong, not crashing, not needing lots of service packs added. Don't care if Windows gets updated from Windows 10 to a Windows 11, it'll still work. We do that, and then it pushes out the web stencils web pages in a way that I think is very lean and very efficient, and it's a really great development to come out.
But you know, and the language itself, though,
the label, you know.
But the language itself, though, look, let's say even though Delphi, you know, let's say it came out of Pascal at the end of the day, and unfortunately, Pascal is seen as an educational language, and it can't do much other than be educational. And if it's an educational, then all you're going to learn is right line, and you don't get to, you know, the in my head anyway, which is partly why I, you know, with my YouTube channel, you know, insert, you know, ad here, is to be able to show people, you know, what can, and yes, I wouldn't have done a web stencil or anything like that because I'm starting a new series, but you know, to be able to showcase what can actually be done. It has advanced a long way from where it was. What you can do with Delphi is exceeds what you think can be done in it. Anything
and
which
it's easier than almost every other system. That's the point.
It's sort of like, you know, it's one of those myths that, you know, I can't do this because it doesn't exist. Did you actually look at it? Nah. You know, so
I didn't know Delphi could do that. That you get people say that. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. You're like, well, you should have looked. You know.
Well, see, I wrote I don't know whether you noticed. I wrote a little tiny article about Pascal deserving a second look, and there was a bit of a thing about my YouTube channel in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, there were some people who said you can't do this or this. And then someone said, well, actually you can, you know, I said, really? You know, so, you know, it's one of those things where prompting discussion or letting people be aware of what's actually possible, you know, can be helpful. And, you know, look, and to be honest, that particular thing wasn't there to try to change workplaces to switch from whatever language to Pascal. It's more, you know, it was honestly intended to say, hey, look, there's this language that you can learn something from. Give it a look at. You know, if you like it, sweet. If you don't, what can you take out of it?
You know, the thing that bugs me as well is that people, as you say, think of it as a learning language, which is completely ridiculous. And I understand where they're coming from. And in fact, just behind my shoulder, right there,
which way?
Is the Pioneering Simplicity book by Marco G. And talks about the history of it. But yeah, it did start out as a language that was easy to teach, but you look at other people's other languages, and I'm not going to knock other languages. There's a reason why there are 1,000 programming languages, and that is someone got taught how to use one particular language and went, well, it's great, but I wish it did this. So I'm going to invent my own language. And that's how Rust came about because there were certain things that needed to be done. That's why Java was invented. That's why C# came about, and even TypeScript. All from the same father who fathered Delphi in the first place, Anders. But I look at other people's code. I see some C# code, and I like C#. It's a great language. It's got its advantages. And I see them writing some code, and I think, my God, why is it so complicated to do something that would be like one line of code in Delphi, and it's like 4 or 5 lines of setting something up, and there's extra decoration on the line and syntactic sugar, and you just think, this seems like doing it the hard way, and Delphi seems to be doing it the easy way, but it does it. That's the point. It's powerful. And in fact, that does kind of lead me on to one of my questions when you were talking about things there, which is what would you add to Delphi? What do you think that Object Pascal is missing in terms of a keyword or a construct?
Okay. I've got 2 things in my head here.
Maybe you think, oh, I'd take 10 away.
No, I have 2 things in my head. One is this is more of a practicality than anything else, this first one, to be honest. But when you write a function, one of the first things I always try to do is to say result, is assigned, something. Why? Because it's so easy to forget that line, and return nothing or undefined. So that would be one thing. If I'm not saying it should be a warning or a hint or anything. Well, it probably is a hint already, but I would like it to. Yeah. I would like it to, let's say, as soon, and look, okay, probably could use a code complete code template to do it for me, but it's one of those things it's easily forgettable, shall we say. One thing I do like I think it comes from, and look, I'm going to steal this from Rust, I think, is that I have seen enough as a project lead, shall we say, I've seen enough code where objects are not freed. And I know we can use interfaces, but the defer, line, I think it's defer from Rust. I like that.
I think my favorite one would be from C, actually, is plus equals and minus equals. So you do an assignment that is basically this of this variable plus that variable again plus something else. I think that would be one that I would like to see. People always go, oh, I want the plus plus. Like in C, you can increment something with an increment operator. So it's I plus plus actually increments the value of I. And they say, oh, I wish Delphi had that. It has it. It's actually inc brackets. And I must be probably, I swear this is a fact, I'm probably one of the few developers you see writing widely seen public code that uses pred, P-R-E-D brackets. Predecessor, because I hate it when I see someone saying for something to something -1. I'm like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to put -1 in. Just put pred and brackets. That's the Pascal way of doing it. It's existed since the very early days of Turbo Pascal. And my brain that's how I do it. And I always think, oh, I really want you to just not put the minus or +1 at the end of it.
Look, actually, I tell you what, one thing I would one thing which this is in my head that Delphi came late to the party with was the idea of iterators. I really liked the idea of iterators when I first came across them in C++. So while they're there, you can get caught out sometimes where if you want to, I'm going to talk free Pascal here. If you drag an iterator out of some class, you get a constructed object which may have to free, which is different to something like for X in whatever. But for me, something like that seems more natural from the C++ landscape. But
I always say when you hear about C++ programmers saying, "Oh, you know, I want to be able to do mobile," and there's a problem with component one, you can't do mobile with C++. But I say, if you're a C++ programmer, you can learn Delphi like that. It's that easy. I mean, it's a unthinking kind of thing to. You have to, you know, unthink C++ on certain things, but the code is actually very, very close. And if you look at the examples in the Rad Studio help, there's a C++ example and a Delphi example. They're almost identical, give or take.
Yep.
So that's the thing that I think the languages are quite close. And Java's similar. You know, Java, you can look at Java code, and in fact, any of these kind of Niklaus Wirth type languages like modular and all this of it looks very, very similar as well. I think they were all based on Algo. I think that was kind of the progenitor of that as well. He was a smart guy. I mean, he died on January 1st this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, no.
Look, I never got to meet him myself, but very interesting.
So going back,
you know.
I guess if we go back a little, once I go back, we're going to talk about I'm going to hit on Wirth again. So. And I'll probably have you know of the book, The Pragmatic Programmer?
Of course.
I assume. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just skip over, you know, whether you or the audience. I think you may agree with me here, though. One of the things he talks about is learning a new language, you know, every year. Or I think it was every year. And he's not necessarily saying to, you know, learn the whole language, you know, but to what can you get out of that language you might be able to apply or whatever else, but. When going back to my university days, I can't remember whether this was part of my master's or undergrad, but we actually used Oberon. Now, Oberon, by the way, came out of Modular 2, which came out of Pascal, which is all that, you know, that family again. But we were not, and by the way, this is really before the internet took off as well, but we were using this particular language in real-time operating systems, and the lecturer gave us no help in how to use the language, but we did it for the subject, and so you had to learn it yourself, basically. And I think, let's say, that sort of learning, you know, helps you for your let's say your software journey, because you need to be able to pick up another language, whether you're going from Delphi to, let's say, C# or C# back to Delphi. By the way, C# and D flat. That's Al Stevens, by the way, just reminded me.
I'm just going to grab the book, actually, because we're throwing out names here, and we're too... we're not youthful, let's put it that way. But for those that are youthful, I think I can get it in camera.
Yeah, I can see that quite well.
Yeah, this is the book by Marco G. I've tried a million times. When I interviewed him, I practiced his name beforehand. He's like, perfect, you got it right. And as soon as I introduced him, I went, Marco Hez. And he's like, no. So now I've always called him Marco G. But I'm going to put a QR code up there. When we're talking about Modular 2 and
Oberon,
you know, Pascal, Oberon, and all the other languages, this book lists all of that. It talks all about that history. If you're doing computer science, kids, if you are watching and you are a student, get this book, because I can't say enough. Disclaimer, I helped edit it and I did the foreword for it, but it's all Marco G's work. He was an absolute genius, a really incredible guy. You should get him on your channel sometime. I'm sure he'd come along.
Okay.
I mean, Jim works with him.
Look, and for me, those look, I don't know if that book has any code in it, shall we say, but
there's like 100 lines total. That's it. Yeah.
Well, but even look, there was I think Jesse. Some of those books I think will stand the test of time.
That one's right. Yeah.
You know, because they will teach you something about what you're doing. You know, as opposed to, well, here's something that will become obsolete in a couple of years because we've changed our technology.
This book is basically a computer history book, and it's the history of Blaise Pascal himself as well. Which actually, as I read through it, because when I'm editing, I had to read the entire book, and I read through it, and there was several things I didn't know about him, but he could have written a book that was kind of the history of Borland. You get me? It could have been, Borland did this, Borland did that, then it was improvised, and it was this, and that. He didn't do that.
Yeah.
What he did was he wrote a history about Pascal specifically. His company, if you go to the Brazilian branch, I'm not sure about the Dutch one, but their office says "We are Delphi." They've got a great big sign outside their office saying "We are Delphi," and they're not messing about. They're all in for Object Pascal, and that's what they do. So to write the history, it was a labour of love. It took him, I think he said, a year and a half, 2 years.
A couple of years, I think he said. And he said he had to worry about his marriage, I think, or you said that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've been an author myself. I've written.
I think it was tongue in cheek, though.
5 books. Well, I don't know. I've been married 3 times, so I'm no one to advise on the longevity of these situations. But the point about it is to get back to sort of the focus of Pascal is that it really tells you like the thought processes behind it. Why does why is Pascal easy to learn? Why is it succinct? Why doesn't it contain a load of stuff, crud that it doesn't need? Why does it? How did it evolve out of other languages, and what was the thinking behind it? The birth of Object Pascal, which really was Pascal plus plus, had some extra stuff on it. Very, very interesting. I saw Delphi on the very first day it was released, and I just knew. I saw it, how you could design the screens visually. The visual bits you design visually. The bits that were behind the scenes that were thinking stuff, you typed in and you put code in. Why doesn't it all work like that? I see people doing what they call now declarative user interfaces, which are trying to solve the problem of different screen sizes and resolutions. But they're literally typing out code to create something visual. It just beggars belief that anybody would think that's a step forward, really. With Delphi and Lazarus is a visual designer, of course that makes a lot of sense to do it. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm going off the deep end about why people do things. To get back to you as a developer, do you have any pet projects? Is there you're apart from the YouTube channel, I guess, but is there something where you go, or do you just go, I'm done for the day, that's it, I'm not touching anything else? So.
Okay. I am. Look, when I say it's still a work in progress. I'm working on look. Okay, it may sound very simple, but it has a purpose, and which I'll tell you about in a moment. But it's a mental. Okay, let's just say there are thousands of apps in the mental health space. And as far as I'm concerned, too many. But that's just a side comment. One of the apps which I have on my own phone is called Virtual Hope Box. Why do I have that particular app? Well, I have a lived condition or living condition. It's associated, look, and part of that, the reality is part of it was to do with my job. Part of it, in my mind, is to do with hemochromatosis, which is where you just basically your ferritin just keeps going up and up. So it has many, and the predisposition. Anyway, one of the tools which I found useful in that particular app, by the way, the Virtual Hope Box was actually developed for American veterans. Modeled on a physical hope box. Anyway, so it's got a word search thing, but the word search has positive words only in it. And while I liked what I like that particular app, shall we say, my dad, who has now, died, he had both Parkinson's. So using, let's say, trying to, find a word on a phone, can be hard. And so what I have done is, let's say, taken the idea from that sort of program, and to be able to, let's say, have different levels, something simple like different levels of difficulty, which obviously impact on the board size and then the number of words you can find and that sort of thing. So, and of course, I want that to look nice. So it uses a black and gold style, from Delphi, which looks quite nice in my opinion. And, you only have to find the beginning letter, or the beginning letter, a letter within the word, and it will then highlight all the letters, in the middle of that. So you don't have to, it's got the one, okay. I'm not saying that you don't, but you know how difficult it can be if you're shaking, how to, highlight a word.
Of course. Yeah.
So
my grandmother had Parkinson's as well, and I remember her, because I was only a little kid when she died. She died in '76, and I always thought that naive as a little kid, I just thought, why is she cold or something? Because nobody explained that this movement was actually a neurological issue that was going on, and that she was not able to control it. But I think a lot of people don't realise that Parkinson isn't just the tremors. There's a whole big thing. There's a guy called Rory Ketman-Jones in the UK, who has got a blog called The Movers and Shakers, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he suffers from Parkinson's disease, and it describes his journey. It's doing an app for that, I think, is extremely worthwhile. If you need some help, let people know. Let me know, and I'll recruit some assistance for you.
Well, I might do that then, because finding the time between YouTube and that, and what I do otherwise is, there's only 24 hours in a day, but I would honestly, probably what I'm thinking out loud talking to you now, probably what I would do, I would just chuck it up onto GitHub and say, hey, this is what I'd like to do. Go crazy.
Contribute. Yeah. Crowdsourcing kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, look,
exactly.
I'm not really doing it for the money. I just want to be able to help, let's say, people who were like my dad, for instance, to be able to do something which takes the mind off their, let's say in this instance, his shake. See, he could hold a block of wood, for instance, and he wouldn't be shaking. His hand wouldn't be, wouldn't be shaking. But if his hand started shaking, he would notice it, and then he'd be looking at that, and then it would just not stop. So something where you can break the circuit, shall we say, of that, my hand shaking, got to stop, hand shaking, got to stop. It doesn't stop. Why's my hand shaking? If you can break that circuit, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's an admirable thing. If people want to discuss that, email me. My email address is down there, and we'll hook you up. But your website, I'll put your website up here as well.
Well, what I'll do, Ian, I'll send you the details, like I said, and I'll just, like I said, I'll probably just chuck the code up there so others can do something with it. And
they can.
Honestly, I would say, look, if other people want to profit off it, well, good on them. They have to live with themselves.
I think that if you use the right license, they can't profit on it. And that's the thing. Unless, I can see there is some argument that some places could use it as a way of helping finance assistance for people with Parkinson's or something like that. But I would say that if you use the right license, they can use the code freely, they can contribute to it and create their own versions from it. But with the
Okay,
right
and now
license.
here's the reason though.
They can't sell it, you know.
Now, here's the reason though why I actually did it. Now, that program, by the way, I actually started with the Delphi Community Edition version 11.
Right.
Now, why did I? Okay, I thought to myself, well, I could do this in Android or pick a language, doesn't really matter what. But this is what I want. Okay, this will now make me sound very whatever the word is you want to do, but I knew that I could have a version on my phone. I could have it in, and that's, let's say, my children are iPhone and addicts. I'm an Android person. My there are people who my psychiatrist, she uses the Mac. She wants to see it. You know,
well, she's got the money, I have to say. That's probably why. So, yeah.
But you know what I'm trying to get at is though that you know I can you got a much broader reach with the lot of source code, and despite what you might dislike about Delphi, that the possibility of that sort of reach, shall we say, has a lot of attraction in my mind anyway.
Yeah. I mean that is actually one of its key strengths, and it's something they've just announced that Flutter, which is kind of competitor but not, is actually being deprecated. They're getting rid of it. That was one of the few other systems that could do what Delphi can do, which is target almost any device. I don't know why they're abandoning it, but that's the way it goes. But with Rad Studio, you can target Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, Android, and that's not a joke. I mean, and effectively as well. I mean, I know our selling point at Embarcadero is that we're saying you can do that from one code base. It's not an idle threat. You really can. There's a few tweaks sometimes, but I wrote a mobile course that we were giving away for upgrades and things like that. 90% of it doesn't have any code in it because it doesn't need it, because you can create a camera app with like 7 lines of code or something like that, and then flip a switch, and now it becomes an iOS app and looks like an iOS app. That's the cool thing about it. I should also point out as well that the other thing is you are actually an MVP.
Yeah, I am.
So if people go there, embarcadero.com, resources partners MVP directory, although they can click on the menu, they'll find your face there. It looks like those folks, and all point that way. And I was one that chose. I managed the MVP program and Tech Partners program, and I chose to make it an MVP based on the content I saw on YouTube of you, really being a champion of Object Pascal. I mean, I have some MVPs that are not really Delphi people, but are more free Pascal, which is fine. For me, the most important thing is the language is used, and I know a lot of your videos are using Lazarus and free Pascal. But hey, I actually know those guys, and they're very credible guys. To be honest, I think we work in slightly different arenas anyway. And like I say, I speak to Detlev probably at least every month. I've written an article for his magazine, and he is Mr. Lazarus. He's the guy who's kind of head of that project, because we're all really singing the same song. We're just using a different instrument as the backing behind it. And look, the secret is free Pascal. So the content I saw, I'm like, why is this guy? This guy should be an MVP, because an MVP is a champion for Delphi, and Object Pascal, and that's exactly what you did. Exactly.
So, look, for my mind, look, because I felt here's nothing. My mother, for instance, she uses a tablet more than anything else, and again, this sounds like I'm trying to grab the whole market, but I wanted to be able to make sure that let's say someone like her, because by the way, she now has early onset Parkinson's. She's 78, but so she's had a good life. Still a good while to go, don't mind you, but
But you're done now, love. Sorry, 78. That's it. Yeah, that.
yeah, you're off. Goodbye. But so let's say from my really professional, where you are dealing with the stresses of completing things. You can only do so many things repeated for so long that you get sick of having to reinvent the wheel in some form. So that I could take a code base and be able to target those different spaces, to me is that's quite alluring.
It's one of the things that we think is a strength that other languages don't seem to value quite as much, which is weird. I mean, C++ is always write once, compile everywhere, which I totally get. But Delphi or Jet Pascal is write once and compile to go everywhere. And between the lot of us, there's not many devices in the world you can't target with Pascal in some way. And from a commercial point of view, obviously our focus is on the things that most people want to use, which is iOS, Android, Windows, Linux to a certain degree, and Mac. You can do that for sure. I mean, I do that all the time in my webinars. But if you then add into that the free Pascal, then you've got Raspberry Pi, you've got weird things like Atari STs, and I mean, I'm sure there's like 1,000 people around the world that go, hooray, I can write a program for the Atari ST. I'm like, why though? I mean, come on, that's technology. It was not that great when it came out. It was certainly not great now. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. Well, look, I don't want to take too much of your time because it's getting late for you.
That's okay. 11:24, but keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, hook up with you and have a conversation. I think the webinars we do quite often, there are topics that people find interesting, like how to create this type of app. We're doing one on Quick Report, which is back from the dead, and you can get it version 12 now of Rad Studio.
Yes,
and a few other things, how to write, web apps and stuff like that. But also, I think it's important to sit there and talk with other developers because we're all different, and yet we're all the same in some ways. There's kind of like a intersection. I'm sure somebody could do a little graph, a really cool graph where we all overlap.
Well, look, as far as I am concerned, I know there are a lot, thousands of developers who are smarter than me.
That's exactly what I say about me.
But I think though that what they may bring to the table, that's maybe good for their specific domain, and what I bring to the table, I can hear a problem and okay, I need to do this. They join this way, so we are all needed to perform our own role to bring about whatever that solution is. So
yeah. And things have changed over the years. When I grew up, my father was a director of ICL, International Computers Limited, and then Control Data Set. So I grew up around the idea of computers. They were not foreign to me. But my dad was a programmer. He couldn't write a line of code. He wouldn't even know where to start. But I grew up in that era where it was exciting. I remember I was already working as an IT manager at the time when the IBM PC was released. So that's how old I am, and I've seen this era of ubiquitous computing where suddenly everybody had a computer on the desktop. Then it evolved into suddenly everybody had a network. And you had LAN parties and stuff where people would bring a switch or whatever and then plug into it. And then it became, now all of a sudden you can have, dial-up internet to broadband DSL to ubiquitous fiber. I have a 2.5 gig fiber in my home. And I think now the next step is the AI. I think it feels to me like I've seen this before. Those kind of changes to changes to what's going on, and AI seems to be the one. But I don't know about you. I don't feel at all threatened by it. I don't feel like, as someone said in a little image the other day, they were doing a meme, and it said, the thing about ChatGPT is they'll replace the programmers with AI, but it still will require a project manager to explain to the AI what it is they want, and the AI understand it. And,
I read about that on Reddit, actually.
Yeah,
Look,
I mean,
I don't know if it's true. I don't care about, I'm talking about Amazon and Google and their use of AI code, or whether it's true or not, or Visa, or all that stuff. Nah, I'm too old to care. But at the end of the day, my thought is that AI can replace, let's say, some of the boring stuff. Can it replace business logic? Put a question mark there. For me, it's still a glorified parrot, spewing out what.
yeah, you teach it some words, and then it rearranges the words. You know, that's and it sounds like it's intelligent.
Because let's say when you're trying to calculate a call charge, someone has to plug data in there somewhere to make it all work. So
yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's a bit of a pushback from people about not having public data that they've put out being used to train AI models. The trouble is, people are misunderstanding the concept of public data, that once you put it out there, it's very difficult to take it back. If it's your personal data and you've clicked on an item that says, yeah, I'll use Facebook, and in return, Facebook will sell me a garden chair because I mentioned it somewhere, then that's the deal you get for not having to pay Facebook. And that's
look, I have a question for you, by the way. But on that note, though, people think they have anonymity today, but if you walk down the middle of Brisbane, shall we say, you're in the mall, there's going to be dozens of cameras trained on you. So, don't pretend that, they don't know who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm shopping for and that sort of stuff.
It's constitutionally protected in the United States, believe it or not. It is actually now. I'll talk about the caveat to that in a minute. But in the Constitution, and I have a copy over there of the US Constitution. I'm a US citizen now, so I had to study the Constitution stuff. But one of the things that they have safeguards against is the government spying on its own people. And a few other things, like not allowing the government to just take the army, take over your house and billet your house with the army, because that happened during the civil, during the battle for independence. But Texas, for example, has no speed cameras, no fixed speed cameras.
Really?
When I go back to the UK, there are thousands of them. And Nebraska used to have speed cameras and got rid of them. Why? Because they had a vote and deemed them unconstitutional. They said that the cameras are effectively spying on people because they were being triggered when people weren't necessarily doing. But also the same as surveillance cameras. There are surveillance cameras around in certain high crime areas, and actually, sadly, because of the prevalence of gun crime, Omaha, for example, has what they call shot spotter cameras. They're actually microphones that detect the sound of shooting, because gang crime, over here, if someone breaks into your house, they're armed for sure. And but in terms of the surveillance that is very, very prevalent in the UK, it doesn't happen in the US in the same way, not overtly. Now, anti-terrorism allows them to override some of your constitutional protections.
Yes.
Because of 9/11. But each time they want to do that, it has to be renewed after a period of time, because it is a constitutional protection. If I go to the UK, I guarantee if I walk around Milton Keynes, where I used to live, or Stony Stratford, or in fact almost any sufficiently large town, I will be constantly filmed, constantly. And and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that because actually it contributes towards my safety. You know, because if someone comes to attack me, the cops can see it on camera and hopefully respond before I've even got a chance to beat the guy back and phone the cops. You know, so there is some advantage. It also means it makes it easier for the cops to go, we don't need to go out to a robbery because we can just review the footage and see the guy turn up and what. But AI put into that is when you start to get a problem, because you know, some countries like China make no secret of the fact that they do drive forward AI. So you see a lot of categorization with OpenCV, which is a library you can use in Delphi, where it can say not only that's a person, but that person appears to be 50s to 60 years old. They're male. They're not smiling, so they're unhappy. They are Caucasian, so they have a kind of fair complexion, a light complexion. It'll tell you the color of your hair. We have a demo that will do all of this. FileStat, which is an Idea company, can even tell you things like whether the person's hair is short or long. You know, so what do you need if you are going to get a description of an attacker or a thief? There's all the characteristics. They've got long hair, it's brown, they're a female, they're a Caucasian, they're 5'2" tall or 5'11" or whatever. That's all done using AI. Now, that's great, except if it can then categorize the ethnicity of someone, and it can say, you know, yes, it can say whether the person's Caucasian or, but what if you are trying to isolate part of your population and you are looking for a specific racial characteristic where you want to victimize those people?
Yeah.
That is where I genuinely think there is a risk, because the normal uses in the United States and the Australia and the UK are probably not a problem. You know, being able to say to ChatGPT, give me a Delphi class that is able to store a person record and their social security number and all the rest of it, and all the update code with the FireDAC or some database. Asking ChatGPT to do that is fine, but that's a legitimate great use. But when you then go on to extend that out into tell me all the people who are dark skinned, who are living in this region where we want to ethnically cleanse them, you know, be some despot in a different country somewhere, and I'm looking to annihilate the population. So
look,
I'm not paranoid about it, but I think there's a healthy disregard.
My view on all of this, look, I can say the same thing about Boxing Day or Halloween or whatever else, but things are created with good intention, and then it gets corrupted along the way.
Money.
Hey,
so
I've got a question for you, though.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so, and
I hope it's one I can answer.
look, if nothing else, I'll have your thoughts. Because I don't know what brought, and I don't know why I went looking for it, but one of the things I've in my last video, by the way, I was talking about the sections of a program, and in doing that, it wasn't that one actually. I stumbled across, the Pascal standards, shall we say, and the last one was about 91, I think it was.
There's a style guide.
They're style guides, but they're not the same as what people might do in Ada or C++, shall we say. I know there is an international organization for Pascal, but
I know what you're going to say. Why isn't there one for Pascal?
Why isn't I don't know. Well, when I say look, I know that. Look, we do have. Look, I'm not going to go into the argument of free Pascal versus, Delphi, and then let's say their differences. But, in my head, if there were something that says, that we're still alive and kicking and we're worthwhile, if something's like 30 years, 34 years old, What does that say? Either it's
It's
brilliant,
actually
but that didn't need to change, or what?
it's more than 40, nearly 50 years old. But I think it's a good point. You know, the answer is I don't know the answer to that. Is there a standard? I suspect there is, because the thing is that both Free Pascal and Delphi are object Pascal.
Yes.
And that is not quite the same as Pascal with objects, which was an Apple construct. Apple, I nearly got a job working at Apple, and I turned it down. You know, and I'm kind of glad I did, because I probably would have been fired. But anyway, the reason that I was offered a job there was because, and I've told this story before, but I was a Pascal programmer and a C programmer. And they had Apple Pascal out, and they had an accounting package written in Apple Pascal, and they were wanting to convert it to C. And so they were looking for people that could speak both languages, and I was one of them. And I looked at the time, Apple was nosediving as a company, and very close to going, you know, bust. And I thought, I don't want to tie my fortunes to a company that's probably going to be gone soon. And as it happened, I probably made the right decision at the time. Nowadays, I think, I could have said ex-Apple employee, and that would have been very good. It was the right thing, and it was a subsidiary anyway. But at that time, like I say, there was Pascal with objects, Apple Pascal, there was UCSD Pascal, and all the rest of it. I wonder if there doesn't exist somewhere a object Pascal standard that is younger than what you're talking about, because I think that when Delphi was released, there must have been some standard that existed in order for people to actually create the compiler in the first place, because you couldn't possibly say this compiler adheres to the standards that we're setting internally. So if you're writing a parser and you're writing a linter, you need to understand what the rules are for the system in order for it to work. So I don't know this answer, so I'm going to go and find out. And I'll tell you who probably knows. Marco G. I bet you he found it at some point. And
Go ask him now then.
You know about that? Oh, it's on this website. Oh God, yeah, it's one of ours as well. So, but the other person I can ask, of course, is another Marco Cantu, who basically is the de facto reference on the Delphi language. If he doesn't know it, it doesn't exist for sure. So,
put it this way, there's solve a few arguments, if nothing else, or probably even, or maybe not.
May create a few. And you know what? If there isn't one, you're right. There should be one. Now, if there should be one, who should create it? And that's the bigger picture.
Look, and I'll tell you, hang on, if you want to, I'm not saying to end it right now, but if you were to look, there are some of the reasons why people would, speak against Delphi or Pascal or whatever. And these were from the responses in the blog. Oh, the begin and end, BEGIN and END were too many. Well, they're only like 4 characters.
Use squiggly brackets.
Well, okay. To me, you're a lazy typist. If I'm going to be honest.
The simple answer is they couldn't be used because they'd already been selected for comments. But the begin and the end, I think he was trying to be almost like explicitly saying, here is the beginning, so that it's human readable. Pascal was designed to be as close as possible to human language, rather as a high level language. And so if and then, you could do without the then. It's irrelevant, because you can say if something and then begin, and that would be it. But I think that it's a good point. You're saying if there was a standard, then we would probably attract less criticism because the standard would perhaps explain the reasoning behind it. Is that what you're saying? Or
well, yeah, that'd be most of it actually, because here's an example. free Pascal users don't like the inline declarations, is because they want to have them in their own.
Now I find them useful.
They want to have them in their own block. Me, I quite like them myself, but I'm not going. It's not the. Put it this way, I would not be standing on a soapbox, preaching, having a separate block for variables. So
it took me a very, very long time to get to the point where I would use them. And I still feel a bit naughty when I'm using them, like I'm doing something wrong, but they do have their place, and they actually help in some ways with the flow of the code. It still looks a little bit wrong because after doing it the other way for 30 odd years, it's a bit odd to do it. But
I would look, okay. I would tell you one
things like that. They're all additions to the language that make an awful lot of sense.
I would tell you one thing.
Anonymous methods as well and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. So when you had one of the things, by the way, I'm going. This is probably more to do with a formal education, computer science. And you could, and we are talking the early 90s, by the way. So hopefully people would know what versions of compilers, etc., were around at that time. And yes, I am talking about modular 2 here, and I am going to be talking about programmers today. But let's say I have an index for a for loop, for instance. Back then, we were told as students in our first year that don't rely on the value in that index at the end of a for loop, because you don't know what the compiler's done with it. Right. And and yet people will argue or think that because they ran it in debug mode, shall we say, that it will be either length -1 or length, whichever way you want to look at it. And the ability, say, to use that inline type declaration there, means that it's only going to be valid for that bit of that for loop, shall we say, and it can prevent, let's say, programmers from, making a mistake, shall we say. Yeah. Because I've seen, and because I've seen people where they, look, it's human nature to make a mistake. But if a language has features that protects the programmer from themselves, to me that's a good thing.
I think you're right, and I think it's a very good example that you used of the loop there, and that's one of the main reasons for having that construct was to make it harder for people to abuse or accidentally misuse a variable. A loop variable should be there because it's required for the loop, and that's the end of it. Different in a while loop, if you're doing a while loop, then there's a variable you may use as a counter and say, whilst this doesn't, that's completely different. But I think these constructs are very important, and again, these are things that need to go into some standard, because explaining those as a Delphi dialect extension, if you like, of the language is important. But free Pascal, they have the Delphi switch to turn on Delphi compatibility. There are many things that have been added to the language. The trick, we try not to add too many, because you can't really improve on the greatness too much. But certain things like type inference from the inline variable is very useful, because it makes your code more succinct. You don't have to have unnecessary types, on there. But also, anonymous methods and stuff like that are widely used in other languages. And in order to be able to take another language's code where someone's explained something and then try and reproduce that in Delphi, it was kind of important to be able to have things like anonymous methods, and plus they're very useful. But you can
do something like, because one of the things which I would have, let's say, we've had like a data set, and you're dealing with bookmarks, shall we say. I'm probably going to go with this, don't you? you'd have a function where you'd have something like, go to the first bookmark, have a loop, to go to each bookmark, do something with the result set. How do you do something with the result set? Well, I'm going to have a function pointer back to here somewhere, which is outside so I've got 3 functions, shall we say. The function one on the button click, which calls the function, say, for each in data set, do something. Here's the next function I want you to use for each record you found. And so the ability to use anonymous functions, in that sort of scope, make things a lot more understandable to me. Because you're not writing as much code as you would otherwise need to.
Yeah.
And it's all localized.
Yeah, and this is the point, is that people go, oh, it's old fashioned, and like, well, it really isn't. It's you can write. We're going to prove it in this webinar series coming up by taking some well-known apps and basically recreating them. We quote Instagram, but it's really, we're not trying to rip off Instagram at all. It's an educational, but we're trying to prove that anything they can do, we can do as well. Not necessarily better, because come on, we can't make a new Instagram, we couldn't make a new Facebook, we couldn't make a new banking, Chase banking app or whatever. But we can do all of the things those apps do and look as good as them, and that's the point. Anyway, it's getting late for you, and
thank you.
time is marching on. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's it's good to talk to another developer, and the subject is always interesting, of course. But you're a great guy. I think more power to you. We'll keep promoting your YouTube. Like and subscribe, people. And I can put QR code up if they're too difficult to type. Just scan the QR code up there. But keep up the good work. I love what you do. I have so many things I have to look at. I can't always drop in and see your stuff, but I do get around to it sooner or later. So it's not the day that you release it, but I do get back to it. You're on my subscriptions. I've clicked on subscribe.
That's okay. Honestly, look, okay. Before you go, this is what I've noticed anyway. For some reason, look, when you can look at your analytics, on your YouTube stuff. Well, for some reason, it's like on a Tuesday at midnight, let's say, is when people start watching. That's all I know. I just release when I've done it.
After this goes out, because we're pre-recording this, after this goes out, you'll see a sudden spike go like that, because I'm not sure how many people have registered, but the last registration we did for the winter webinars, it was like at least 1,800 people, I think. So even if 10% of them decide to come and watch, you're going to see a bit of an increase in traffic. I mean, you're doing all right. You're getting quite a few subscribers. So,
I actually got 100 out of my road blog anyway.
So there you go then. So it's working.
But look, honestly though, like I said, I just want to give those who do Pascal let's say a leg up in what they do, and if they haven't, they can consider it. And if people seem to find that helpful, so I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, well, great. I appreciate it. All right, well, thanks a lot. I'm going to call it a day.
How did the two Ronnies end their show? Was it good night and God bless or something?
Yes, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Well, good night from me, and it's good night.
And good night from him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we'll
only Brit would know that, so keep it in there.
Yeah, we'll keep that bit in. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And this will be going out in a couple of weeks. But if you're around for the Q&A, which might not be, because I think it's like 2 a.m. for you, so it's fine. But
we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Keep me informed anyway. Okay. Thank you.
All
right. Bye.
Well, that was fantastic. Well, that was Tim Coates and doing his thing. We went on quite a long time. We'll probably be editing this. This is pre-recorded. But as I've said before, if you are into YouTube and you like YouTube, then go here and click on his subscribe button and on his like button. It helps YouTubers. he won't know who you are. He won't know what country you're in. Actually, I think he knows a rough country, but won't know what town or city or anything like that. He won't know anything about you. And give him a boost because he deserves it. He does a lot of blogging and YouTube production about development in general. And obviously go to our own as well, which is at Embarcadero Tech at YouTube, and click like and subscribe there. But anyway, that's it from me, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Well, that was pre-recorded, and one of the longest ones we've done so far. I just want to thank everybody who stuck it out. We had a lot of people. I thought for sure we get a few people going, it's been an hour and 40 minutes, I'm giving up. But actually, no, apparently not. You're all very keen. David I was around as well, and David I being older than me, which is good because he was around in the days of things like Turbo Pascal, and he said, it was the de facto standard for the creation of Delphi. Absolutely. And the book that we mentioned, and we'll plug it a lot, but it's a really good book. And I don't get any money for that, by the way. It's all Marco G's good sort of efforts and things. But yeah, it's really good because it covers all that kind of stuff. And I really like Tim. David I was saying as well. We mentioned standards, and actually he said, there is an ISO standard. I looked it up. I think the most recent one was like 91 or something like that, but I'm sure there's some more. I totally forgot to ask Marco KN2 because Marco will immediately know. He'll quote the website off the top of his head. He's been to the International Pascal Conference and was the first winner of the Nicholas Worth Award there as well. But really good stuff, and I appreciate David I also giving his view on some of these things as well, because I've said this before and I say it again to the few hundred people that are sticking around. Without David I, there would be no developer advocacy, people like me and all the rest of it, because he pretty much invented it. And David is the pattern that most of us follow in terms of developer advocacy. I do things my own way, and they seem to resonate with people, and we're having some success in encouraging people to use the language and understand that you can do almost anything with it. But Jim McKeith, who preceded me, and Anders and a few of the others as well, but David I was the one that kicked it off. He was a director of Ballin back in the day. I think I'm right in saying that. But even so, he was around, and what you see in this kind of evolved advocacy now with all these YouTube channels and different era, I think, of interconnected social media and streaming. David I started it off, and it was a lot harder, and David I knew instinctively what he was doing. So he's a great guy, and I think he's awesome. Thanks to everybody who joined us on the chat. I actually have to go and have a meeting about another webinar in 6 minutes as well, so I'm not going to stick around very long, but I appreciate everybody who comes to these things. We're back on Tuesday, where we're going to attempt to create, I'm going to call it Instagram, but we're really just going to try and show the bare bones of a social media app that takes a photograph, and an Android app that will do that, posts it up to a Delphi backend, has a very modern website look and feel that will show those images using web stencils, and we'll be using some other techniques as well. We'll then, I'll probably take most of the webinar on Tuesday to just get to the point where we've got something working. And then on the Fridays, we're going to do some stuff with Richard Hazel at some point, not this Friday, I think, but soon we'll be having Richard Hazel. We're going to use his Amazon AWS components to store things in S3 and do some object recognition for the Bro app and the Not a Hot Dog app rip-off that we're doing. Not a rip-off, it's educational app that will show you how it works from Silicon Valley, the series, because I'm an absolute geek. I'm wearing my company t-shirt today, but I do have a Pied Piper t-shirt for those of you that know what Silicon Valley the TV series is HBO. It's a great thing. But anyway, thanks very much, everybody. And I will see you same time as we started today, but on Tuesday. And for those of you that are Ultra Edit fans, if you've subscribed to the Ultra Edit webinar on Monday, you'll see me on Monday. But until then, have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay warm, and stay healthy.